Olivia Sinclair had always believed in love that balanced ambition with compassion. She had poured herself into her marriage with Lucas Whitman, hoping that his brilliance as a businessman would be matched by his tenderness at home. For the first few years, there had been laughter, shared dreams, and late-night conversations about a future they would build together. But over time, the cracks had begun to show, small at first: a dismissive glance, a sarcastic remark, a late-night business trip excused with hollow apologies. By the time the divorce proceedings began, the home she once considered a sanctuary had become a battlefield. Lucas, with his perfectly tailored suits and icy smile, seemed to take perverse pleasure in public displays of mockery. He belittled her in front of lawyers, casually questioned her competence, and spread subtle rumors to anyone who would listen. Friends who had once envied their union now whispered about her supposed failures, and even colleagues seemed hesitant to offer support. Olivia endured it quietly, knowing that reacting angrily would only feed his amusement. She had learned the hard way that Lucas thrived on control and humiliation, and the courtroom had become his stage. Yet, despite the constant erosion of her confidence, Olivia clung to hope. Somewhere deep inside, she believed that a man she had once loved might recognize his arrogance and change course. Perhaps he would see the unfairness, the cruelty of his words, and remember why they had promised to spend their lives together. But hope slowly faded as each day revealed the man Lucas had become: charming to the world, ruthless in private, and entirely incapable of empathy. Olivia began to understand, with painful clarity, that their marriage was no longer salvageable. Her endurance was no longer about patience, it was about survival, about preparing herself for a life where she could reclaim dignity and power on her own terms. The divorce between Olivia Sinclair and Lucas Whitman had become more than just a private matter, it was a spectacle that everyone seemed to watch with morbid curiosity. Paparazzi camped outside the courthouse, snapping photos of Olivia's composed yet weary expression as she stepped from her car. Lucas, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on the attention, flashing a confident smile that masked the cruelty in his eyes. Inside the courtroom, he wasted no opportunity to flaunt his wealth, wearing custom suits and checking his watch with an air of boredom, as if the proceedings were a minor inconvenience rather than a life-altering event. Lucas's tactics were subtle yet cutting. He mocked Olivia's choices in front of the lawyers, insinuating she was incapable of managing her finances or understanding business affairs. Whispered rumors of her alleged indiscretions spread quickly through their social circles, fueled by friends and acquaintances eager to witness the unraveling of a golden couple. Every gesture he made, the smirk as a witness answered a question, the sarcastic tone in response to her lawyer, was calculated to humiliate her publicly. Olivia, meanwhile, struggled to maintain composure. Each jibe and every rumor tested her patience and self-control. She felt the weight of judgmental stares, the sharp edge of whispered gossip, and the sting of betrayal from people she had once trusted. Yet, beneath the surface of her calm demeanor, a quiet determination began to take root. She realized that her dignity did not depend on Lucas's approval or the opinions of the world watching. Maintaining composure was not just about surviving the spectacle, it was about asserting her strength, preserving her self-respect, and silently preparing to turn the tide in her favor. As the courthouse clock ticked on, Olivia understood one truth clearly: while Lucas sought to diminish her, his arrogance would only fuel her resolve to reclaim power, respect, and the life she deserved. Behind the closed doors of her apartment, Olivia Sinclair shed the facade she had maintained for the world. Outwardly composed, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, sitting at her desk with documents strewn around her. Each paper told a story, not just of financial accounts or property agreements, but of her careful planning to reclaim control over a life that Lucas Whitman had tried to dominate. She had learned that in a battle with a man like him, patience, strategy, and precision were her greatest weapons. Humiliation had followed her like a shadow, but she refused to let it define her. Every mocking word Lucas had spoken in the courtroom, every rumor spread about her character, fueled a quiet fire within. Olivia meticulously reviewed bank statements, property deeds, and business contracts, noting every discrepancy, every opportunity to protect herself and assert her rights. She compiled evidence of Lucas's misconduct, from shady investments to financial mismanagement, ensuring that no one could dismiss her claims or diminish her credibility. Consultations with her lawyer became daily rituals. Olivia approached them not as a defeated spouse, but as a strategist, questioning every angle and anticipating Lucas's moves. She considered not only legal outcomes but the psychological chess game Lucas played, predicting his arrogance, his overconfidence, his tendency to underestimate her. Even in moments of exhaustion, Olivia's independent mind shone. She made decisions decisively, researched thoroughly, and refused to rely on anyone else to save her. Every small victory, finding a missing document, uncovering a hidden clause, anticipating a courtroom tactic, reminded her of her resilience. By the time she looked up from her papers, her reflection in the window showed more than a weary woman, it revealed a force quietly gathering strength. Olivia knew the battle ahead would be grueling, but she also understood that victory was not just possible, it was inevitable for someone who refused to be broken by arrogance and cruelty. Lucas Whitman entered the courtroom with his usual air of entitlement, the kind that made others uneasy, and Isabella, well, Olivia, angry beneath her calm exterior. Every step he took, every flick of his wrist, seemed calculated to remind the world that he was in control. He smirked at every objection her lawyer raised, muttering sarcastic quips under his breath that echoed through the courtroom just enough for the jury and witnesses to hear. "Really, Olivia, you can't possibly expect anyone to take that seriously," he said one morning, his voice dripping with condescension, sending a ripple of murmurs across the room. Lucas believed entirely in his own cleverness. He was certain Olivia lacked the sophistication and acumen to navigate the legal labyrinth he had mastered. His overconfidence blinded him to the subtle ways she had prepared, the evidence she had quietly gathered, and the allies she was cultivating. Every mockery was intended to undermine her credibility, every smirk a reminder of his perceived dominance. Yet Olivia remained composed, hiding the surge of determination behind her serene expression. She understood that underestimating her was Lucas's greatest mistake, one he would come to regret as the proceedings slowly revealed the depth of her intellect, strategy, and resilience. Nathan Blackwood, known in financial circles as a man who wielded immense power yet maintained a reputation for fairness, noticed the tension surrounding Olivia Sinclair. Unlike others who whispered about the divorce or gawked at Lucas's antics, Nathan observed quietly, noting the subtle shifts in her demeanor and the evidence of her meticulous preparation. Their first interaction occurred at a charity event, where Olivia had attended to maintain her social standing despite the ongoing turmoil. Nathan approached her not with flamboyance or patronizing charm, but with a measured, respectful curiosity. "Miss Sinclair," he said, his tone deliberate yet warm, "I couldn't help but notice your handling of recent challenges. It's impressive." Olivia, wary of strangers but attuned to nuance, studied him carefully. There was no hint of condescension in his voice, no ulterior motive she could discern. "Thank you," she replied cautiously. "It's been difficult." Nathan's eyes reflected understanding rather than pity. "Sometimes, the strongest victories come from the quietest preparation. If you ever need guidance navigating complicated waters, I can offer insight." Over subsequent encounters, Nathan subtly offered strategic advice, helping Olivia anticipate legal maneuvers and identify weaknesses in Lucas's approach. Their relationship was founded on mutual respect, intelligence, and a shared understanding of power dynamics. There was no romance, no whispered promises, only the recognition of two minds aligned in strategy and foresight, quietly plotting to ensure justice and fairness prevailed. Nathan's support gave Olivia a renewed sense of confidence, a reminder that she was not alone in the battle ahead. Olivia Sinclair had spent months quietly preparing, and now the results of her diligence began to surface. Every sarcastic remark Lucas had thrown at her, every smirk meant to intimidate, now fueled a meticulous strategy designed to reclaim her life and dignity. She combed through contracts, scrutinized financial statements, and identified loopholes that had previously gone unnoticed, realizing that Lucas's arrogance had blinded him to potential vulnerabilities in his own empire. She enlisted the help of a small, trusted team, legal experts, financial analysts, and friends who understood the stakes. Each ally brought unique skills to the table, helping Olivia map out the most effective path to victory. Together, they uncovered mismanaged assets, undocumented transactions, and patterns of deception Lucas had assumed would remain invisible. Every discovery was a silent blow against his perceived invincibility. Lucas, confident in his control, continued his habitual mockery in public and in court. But Olivia's unshakable composure began to frustrate him. Her calm demeanor, coupled with the growing weight of evidence she wielded, made it increasingly clear that she was no longer the passive, compliant spouse he had underestimated. The courtroom, the boardroom, even private negotiations, all spaces where he had thrived on dominance, were slowly becoming arenas where he was outmaneuvered. Tension escalated as pride collided with power. Lucas's ego could not reconcile the fact that Olivia was not merely surviving his tactics but actively dismantling them. Every sarcastic comment he made fell flat, met with measured responses or strategic silence. Olivia's retaliation was precise, professional, and entirely effective, leaving him increasingly agitated and unbalanced. By the time the final hearing approached, Olivia was no longer just defending herself, she was asserting dominance, demonstrating intelligence, resilience, and strategic foresight. The tables had turned, and the woman who had endured public humiliation now held the cards. Lucas could mock all he wanted, but the battle had shifted. Olivia had reclaimed control, proving that pride without respect for others' intelligence was a weakness, not a strength. The courtroom was alive with tension, the air thick with anticipation as lawyers and spectators prepared for the final hearing. Olivia Sinclair walked in with quiet confidence, her posture straight, her gaze steady. Every eye in the room, from the judge to the spectators, could sense the shift in energy. This was no longer a battle she faced timidly, this was a showdown she had meticulously orchestrated. Lucas Whitman sat across from her, his usual smug expression intact, though under the surface, frustration simmered. He leaned back in his chair, attempting to project control, but every glance at Olivia reminded him that the game had changed. She had prepared thoroughly, her documents organized, evidence meticulously verified, and allies ready to counter any attempt at manipulation. As proceedings began, her lawyer presented damning evidence of Lucas's misconduct, financial mismanagement, concealed assets, and documented arrogance in business dealings that contrasted sharply with his public persona. Witnesses corroborated her claims, reinforcing the narrative of a man whose pride had consistently overshadowed responsibility. Lucas attempted his usual sarcastic interjections, but Olivia's calm demeanor and the weight of the evidence rendered his remarks hollow. The courtroom shifted subtly with each revelation. Judges exchanged meaningful glances, spectators murmured, sensing the growing imbalance of power. Olivia's voice, measured and confident, outlined each detail with clarity, emphasizing her competence in preparation. Lucas's smugness began to crack. He fidgeted, his composure faltering as evidence stacked against him, undermining every illusion of control he had maintained for years. By the end of the session, the power dynamic was unmistakable. Olivia, once publicly mocked and underestimated, now held authority not just over the courtroom but over her life's narrative. Lucas, for the first time, seemed uncertain, exposed, and confronted by the consequences of his arrogance. It was the turning point, humiliation and strategy collided, and Olivia had emerged as the force commanding respect. The hum of murmurs filled the courtroom as the final arguments neared their peak, but all attention shifted when a sleek, black limousine glided smoothly to the courthouse entrance. Nathan Blackwood stepped out, his presence magnetic, exuding calm authority and wealth that needed no announcement. Even in a room accustomed to opulence, there was something commanding about him, a quiet intensity that drew eyes and whispered respect. Cameras pivoted, pens paused mid-note, and even the judge briefly raised an eyebrow, acknowledging the subtle disruption. Inside the courtroom, Lucas Whitman was mid-sentence, preparing yet another sarcastic quip aimed at undermining Olivia. His words froze in his throat. The smirk that had been his armor vanished as he caught sight of Nathan walking toward the bench with measured, confident strides. Lucas's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief passing over his features. Nathan Blackwood's reputation preceded him, ruthless in business yet incorruptible, a man whose presence alone could shift power dynamics in any room. Whispers rippled through the courtroom like electricity. Lawyers exchanged looks, witnesses stiffened. Nathan's arrival was not casual, it was a statement, an unspoken declaration that Olivia was no longer alone in the fight. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the air thick with tension. Lucas, accustomed to commanding attention, felt a new gravity pull against him. He realized that the audience he had relied upon to validate his superiority was now witnessing a scene far beyond his control. Every eye seemed to ask the same unspoken question: how would the man who mocked so easily respond to this arrival? Lucas Whitman sat frozen in his chair, the words he had intended to throw at Olivia dying unspoken. His usual sarcasm, the smirk that had fueled courtroom intimidation for weeks, disappeared entirely. Nathan Blackwood's mere presence had silenced him, and for the first time, Lucas felt the fragile foundation of his influence begin to tremble. The arrogance he had wielded so effortlessly now felt hollow and ineffectual. Olivia, seated calmly across from him, felt a quiet surge of vindication. She had anticipated this moment, not just Nathan's arrival, but the visible unraveling of Lucas's confidence. The tables had turned, and she watched as the man who had mocked her publicly and privately struggled to reconcile his ego with the reality before him. Courtroom whispers heightened the tension, the low hum of astonishment growing louder as spectators and legal staff observed Lucas's discomfort. Some exchanged knowing glances, recognizing the shift in power that had been brewing silently for months. Lucas's silence was loud, a testament to the collapse of the control he had so arrogantly wielded. Olivia's composure, in contrast, radiated strength, her quiet observation speaking volumes. She was no longer the woman under his mockery, but the one holding authority. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Olivia Sinclair sat with poise, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression calm yet alert. Every whisper, every glance from spectators, conveyed the anticipation that had been building for months. Lucas Whitman, who had relied on arrogance and mockery as his shields, shifted uneasily in his seat, now acutely aware that his control had slipped. When the judge spoke, the words were measured but decisive. Olivia's divorce settlement was overwhelmingly favorable. She retained full rights to shared assets, secured a substantial financial provision, and received clear legal recognition of Lucas's misconduct. The room seemed to exhale collectively, murmurs of approval mixed with disbelief at the reversal of fortune. Lucas's shoulders slumped slightly, his earlier bravado stripped away by the authority of the law and the undeniable evidence Olivia had presented. Public opinion began to pivot almost immediately. News outlets covered the case with renewed attention, highlighting Olivia's composure, intelligence, and meticulous preparation. Social media buzzed with admiration for a woman who had faced humiliation and emerged victorious, her dignity intact. Friends and colleagues who had once hesitated now expressed admiration, recognizing the courage it took to endure months of ridicule while quietly orchestrating her own triumph. For Olivia, the victory was more than material, it was profoundly personal. Sitting in the courtroom, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of empowerment that came from reclaiming control over her life. Lucas's humble demeanor, juxtaposed with her composed strength, offered a silent validation of every strategic move she had made. She had turned adversity into opportunity, humiliation into resolve, and mockery into the fuel for her success. The tables had not just turned, they had been upended, and Olivia Sinclair emerged not only victorious but transformed, a woman who had finally seized the power that was always hers. Nathan Blackwood waited discreetly after the hearing, a quiet presence amid the chaos. He approached Olivia with measured steps, offering a handshake that conveyed respect and acknowledgement rather than condescension. "Ms. Sinclair," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "you've handled this situation with remarkable clarity and strategy. It's rare to see someone navigate such challenges with both intelligence and integrity." Olivia regarded him thoughtfully, appreciating the absence of flattery or superficial charm. "Thank you," she replied. "It's been a difficult process, but I've learned a lot about resilience and focus." Nathan nodded, understanding the subtext in her words. "There's more opportunity ahead, beyond just personal victories. If you're open to it, I'd like to offer guidance in professional matters, collaborations where your skills and insight could thrive without limitations." their discussion was rooted in strategy, respect, and mutual understanding. Nathan made no assumptions, offered no pressure, only possibilities. Olivia began to see avenues for growth she had previously dismissed, realizing that her future did not have to revolve around revenge or restitution. She could embrace empowerment, innovation, and influence on her own terms, guided by experience, intelligence, and alliances built on integrity. This was a new chapter, one where she was not just surviving but strategically navigating a path toward greater independence and professional strength. The aftermath of the courtroom drama spread like wildfire across media outlets. News channels replayed clips of Olivia Sinclair walking into the courthouse with composed elegance, juxtaposed with Lucas Whitman's stunned and silent reaction at Nathan Blackwood's arrival. Headlines splashed across websites and social media: Olivia Sinclair triumphs over arrogant ex, Lucas Whitman humbled in courtroom showdown, and rival billionaire's arrival stuns divorce proceedings. Every frame of the limousine's sleek pull-up, every glance exchanged in the courtroom, became fodder for discussion, commentary, and endless online speculation. Gossip traveled faster than the official reports. Colleagues, friends, and distant acquaintances all debated Lucas's unusual silence and the humiliation etched across his face. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now publicly exposed, and the shift in perception was palpable. Meanwhile, Olivia received admiration and respect for her intelligence, composure, and strategic planning. Analysts praised her patience and foresight, emphasizing that her victory was not just legal but symbolic, a woman asserting dignity and control in a world often dominated by arrogance and wealth. Public opinion rapidly began to reshape itself. Even those who had quietly doubted her capabilities or questioned her resilience now acknowledged her strength. Social media feeds overflowed with encouragement, personal reflections on perseverance, and discussions about the importance of strategy over bluster. Olivia's image evolved from the quietly suffering spouse to a figure of empowerment, admired not for retaliation, but for her ability to turn adversity into triumph. In every article, every post, every whispered conversation, her quiet victory over Lucas Whitman became an emblem of intelligence, patience, and dignity prevailing over mockery and pride. In the stillness of her apartment that evening, Olivia reflected on the months of turmoil and preparation that had led to her victory. She thought about the lessons she had learned, not merely about law, finances, or strategy, but about herself. Trust had become a deliberate choice. She now understood the value of placing faith in those who had proven themselves worthy and the necessity of remaining cautious around those whose intentions were murky. Self-worth had transformed from a fragile belief to an unshakable foundation. Olivia recognized that no public humiliation or private mockery could diminish the value of her intellect, resilience, or dignity. Every sarcastic remark from Lucas, every smirk intended to intimidate, had become fuel for her growth rather than a source of doubt. Strategic thinking, she realized, was more than a tool, it was a lifeline. The meticulous planning, careful alliances, and quiet observation she had employed were not just tactics for winning the divorce, they were frameworks for navigating life itself. Pain, once overwhelming, had become a teacher, showing her the depth of her endurance and the importance of patience. Olivia smiled faintly, sensing a new clarity. The past could no longer hold her captive, she had transformed adversity into empowerment. The future, once uncertain and daunting, now felt expansive, full of possibilities that she could shape with intention, intelligence, and confidence. In that moment, she acknowledged the woman she had become, resilient, self-aware, and unafraid to seize the opportunities that lay ahead. Days later, as Olivia began to organize her next steps, Lucas made a final, desperate attempt to regain influence. He appeared at her office, words rehearsed and pride intact, trying to assert the authority he believed he still held. Olivia, however, met him with calm composure, a quiet smile playing on her lips. His arrogance, once intimidating, now seemed hollow against the steadfastness she had cultivated. She listened patiently but responded only with measured, polite dismissal, leaving Lucas unable to provoke the reaction he craved. Meanwhile, Nathan Blackwood observed from a distance, his presence a quiet reassurance. He hinted at continued collaboration, professional mentorship, and strategic guidance, signaling opportunities for growth that extended far beyond revenge or personal vindication. Olivia's mind, once consumed with proving herself, now embraced broader horizons, potential for influence, achievement, and empowerment in ways she had never imagined. The subtle twist was clear: Lucas's attempts at control were irrelevant, his arrogance impotent against a woman who had learned to wield strategy, patience, and intelligence with precision. Olivia's victory was complete. Not only had she reclaimed her life, but she had opened a new chapter, fortified by lessons learned, allies gained, and an unshakable sense of self. The story of mockery and humiliation had transformed into one of empowerment and strategic triumph, leaving Lucas behind and Olivia standing unshaken, ready for the life she was meant to lead.